Hello anime fan, welcome back to What If Animes 2.0. So in this video you gonna see, what if Naruto was chosen by the gods to transcend ninja limits? This is part 1. And if you want more, then hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. So let's getting the video, and do check out the author of the story. I blow myself up, is this thing on? Yeah? Oh good. Hi, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, former member of the ninja village known as Village Hidden in the Leaves. I suppose I could explain what the Leaf Village is to you, but all you need to know for now is that I learned most of what I know about fighting from there. I'm getting off topic. You're probably more interested in the actual adventure in this story. I suppose a good day to begin would probably be the day Pervy Sage decided to try adding a couple of new things to my training regime. Pervy Sage, otherwise known as Jiraiya the Toad Sage, had taken me from the village hidden in the leaves to be trained. Unlike most of my normal training that I would have gotten from the village hidden in the leaves, it was far more hands-on, and was far more difficult if your stamina wasn't able to keep up with it. Trust me, even a stamina freak like me continually wound up lying on my bed each night wondering how I had made it back to my room. We were currently in the city of Higurashi, a city a good ways outside of Wave Country. He actually suggested it early in the morning, over breakfast if I remember right. I was so shocked, I nearly spewed my food on him in a rather comedic fashion. Luckily for me, I was able to swallow my food before I spoke. You want to try what? Pervy Sage sighed. I think the best shot we have at creating this technique is to draw on the Kyuubi's chakra in bulk. So we're going to test just how much power you can take and can control later today. It will be a learning experience for both of us. I sat back, thinking it over. The technique that Pervy Sage had told me about sounded highly dangerous to use for any normal ninja. But with the Kyuubi's chakra powering it, it just might work. I grinned at him, a feeling of excitement coming over me. When do we get started? Pervy Sage chuckled, shaking his head. We'll have to do it later this evening, after your standard training. You seem to draw on the Kyuubi's power best whenever you're a bit more tired from your usual activities. We'll also have to make sure that we make sure to keep our training away from everyone else. Just in case something goes wrong, for their safety and our own. I nodded to myself. Pervy Sage was still talking for a little bit, explaining the different exercises that we'd be going over. I'm not really sure what half the things were. I was too busy thinking on how I was going to draw out more of the Kyuubi's chakra. It was easy enough when I was asking for rent on any other occasion, but taking more could be potentially dangerous. Of course, don't let it be said that I shy away from a challenge. In fact, I was pretty sure that I was going to have fun trying to figure this out. It would only be later that I would look back and realize how stupid I am. As it was, I followed Pervy Sage out of the hotel we were staying at, my eyes quickly taking in my surroundings. Pervy Sage had kept me locked in my room for the past 2 days and had told me to read some books he had left for me. Since I had been exhausted from the previous months of strenuous activities, I felt that a few days of rest might actually be good for me. I'm sure that my friends would laugh if they heard that. Me, actually doing what a teacher told me to do. And on top of that, reading books for reasons other than for fun would probably end up making them die laughing. As it was, I did actually learn some pretty cool stuff, but why he wanted me to read books on science I don't know. Did you read any of the books I left for you? Pervy Sage as we walked down the street. As I nodded, a small grin crossed his face. Good, now follow me. He turned into a quiet little restaurant, which surprised me a bit. I was half expecting him to drag me off to one of his normal stopping points for research. We walked in, got a table for 2, and were quickly seated. Still confused, I gave Pervy Sage a confused look. He had a serious look on his face, one he only had during serious training and fights. Naruto, this is an important exercise, so pay close attention. I leaned forward, waiting expectantly for him to explain what the training was. However, he remained silent, acting casual as we were asked for our orders. As soon as our waitress had left, he glanced at me. How many men are currently in the room? I blinked. What? How many men are in the room? Okay, that's not exactly what I was expecting. Heck, it wasn't even connected to any of the books I had read. I turned around, trying to get a look at the people around us, only to be stopped by Pervy Sage. Without looking, I gave him a frustrated look. How am I supposed to know that without looking? Pervy Sage shook his head. A good ninja takes in his surroundings the moment he enters a room. You can never really know when someone is an enemy in our profession. You have to be cautious and aware of everything. My expression turned into one of surprise. I hadn't really thought of anything like that, though that didn't really explain what that had to do with the books I had read. Grumbling to myself, I closed my eyes, trying to remember how many people had been on the room when we came in. Unsure of who was a guy and who was a girl, I threw out a wild guess. 4? Pervy Sage shook his head. How many employees are working right now? I don't know. How many couples? I don't know. What color was our waitress's eyes? I don't know. I was beginning to get frustrated with his questions. It felt like we were just going in circles. Pervy Sage sighed. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. We spent the next half of the day just doing that exercise. I got a bit better, now that I understood what I was supposed to be looking for. I still missed more than half of the questions, but I was certain that I was noticing a lot of the things I hadn't before. Not that I really paid much attention in the first place, but that was besides the point. Shortly after lunch, we went outside of the village we were staying in for strenuous combat practice. I'd been getting a lot better thanks to Pervy Sage's help, not that I planned on telling him that yet. He'd probably believe he hadn't taught me right because we hadn't visited the hot springs enough. Not that I would particularly hate going to the hot springs. After all, they are relaxing. And I'm still a guy. Finally, as the sun began to fall behind the mountains, Pervy Sage decided that it was time to prepare ourselves. I tried not to cry out in relief. My chakra reserves were drained, and I was pretty sure that if we had continued to train, I wouldn't have been able to go through with the next part of our training. Then again, it was only due to my amazing stamina that I was able to keep moving for a bit. We moved a bit further away, towards a more barren area. Settling in, we set ourselves up. Within moments, we'd set up a perimeter to help us try to control the Kyuubi's chakra. As I worked on the perimeter, Pervy Sage had a strange-looking frog pop out of his mouth. Strange meaning its upper body was a frog, while its lower half was a scroll. I'm not joking, the scroll opened up with words and everything. After a moment of talking to the frog and fiddling with some of the words on it, he turned to me. I need to see your necklace. Why? I asked, confused by the request. The necklace he was referring to was the one that used to belong to the first Hokage, and that I had won from Tsunade, the first Hokage's granddaughter. It was my prized possession, and I didn't go anywhere without it. Pervy Sage had never asked me to take it off either, which is why I was confused by his request. The necklace is designed to keep the Kyuubi's energy suppressed. Taking it off will help us release the Kyuubi's energy. It should speed up the process and help us achieve our goal earlier. He stated. I bit my lip and thought. I didn't really want to take it off, but if it was inhibiting my training, I didn't think twice as I took it off and handed the necklace to Pervy Sage. I needed to get stronger to bring back Sasuke, and nothing would stop me from fulfilling that promise. I would later reflect on that moment as the stupidest thing I've ever done. I'm being serious, the stupidest thing. And that my opinion of being able to make unstoppable promises was wrong. Anything can be stopped. Even my unbreakable promises were no match for what was going to happen. Are you ready? I nodded. All right. Let's try this out. He placed his hand on my seal, a strange feeling of dread and excitement rushing through me. Something big was coming. He gave it a small twist, like he was partially opening a jar, and took a step back. I looked at myself, waiting for the rush of chakra that I was accustomed to. Nothing happened. I looked at Pervy Sage, unsure of whether or not it had worked. I was just about to ask if I was supposed to feel anything when it happened. That old, familiar energy began to rush into me. Now, I felt the Kyuubi's chakra flow into me before, but this was different. Like the difference between a rock and a boulder, bad comparison, but I can better explain the size than the feel. Almost at once, I felt angry, similar to how I usually feel whenever I used the Kyuubi's chakra, only it felt like it was growing. After a second, the chakra actually began to seep out of me and form around me in a fox shape. I was a bit surprised, unaware that this happened when I got a certain amount of chakra, but my attention quickly shifted to another fact. The energy was still gushing out. I growled at a second tail of chakra formed. I could feel the Kyuubi's presence growing in the back of my head, but I could also hear Pervy Sage speaking calmly in front of me. His voice just barely getting over the sound of my blood in my ears. You're doing great, Naruto, just hang on. Easy for him to say, he wasn't the one with an enraged demon sealed in him trying to through him. Now I've been angry before, I've been pissed off before, but this was more rage than I was usually used to. I was pretty sure that I was seeing a couple of spots in my vision, though that may have just been me feeling tense. I could almost hear the Kyuubi's voice speaking to me now. And the energy was still coming. I clawed at the ground in a feral manner as the third tail slowly extended. I wanted to destroy everything. I no longer knew why I felt like that, I just wanted to see its destruction. A part of me knew better, the rational part of me, and tried to rein myself in, but I was pretty much fighting a losing battle. The anger was so satisfying, my hunger for power felt loosened, while at the same time suddenly wanting more of it. Naruto, are you still okay? Despite my enraged state, I managed a nod. Do you want to continue? I nodded again. Alright, be careful. More power rushed into me. This time though, the energy wasn't the only thing to come through. Almost like an itch in the back of my head, I could feel the Kyuubi's presence pushing through. It was so filled with rage and so much power. I heard it whispering words I couldn't understand, not that I cared at the time. I couldn't really think all that straight due to the fact that I was seeing red, more angry than I had ever felt in my life. Though that might just have been the Kyuubi's chakra I was seeing, then the Kyuubi decided to take over. I don't know why I remember what happened next so vividly, but it was something that would change my life as well as haunt me. I saw through my own eyes, feeling like I was trespassing in someone else's mind and body. I saw Pervy Sage step back, realizing that something was horribly wrong. I wanted to yell at him to run, that he was in danger. But nothing came out. I had lost all control. The Kyuubi looked around, flexing my hands. Almost experimentally. I felt its nervousness, its apprehension, which confused me. What on earth could possibly make the Kyuubi apprehensive? And then it did something I never thought possible, or would have believed if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. The Kyuubi went through a series of hand seals before slamming my hands on the ground. Watching in surprise and amazement, I watched as a large group of seals spread around myself, the Kyuubi in a manner similar to the summoning technique. Although, the seals were completely off. I mean, since when is there a horseshoe-shaped kanji? Pervy Sage seemed to think that something was wrong though, because he began going through a series of hand seals himself. I can only guess what he was trying to do, because I never saw what he did. The Kyuubi's energy disappeared into the seas that were now surrounding me. For a brief second, I thought it was over. Then, the seals rapidly rushed from off the ground and across my skin. In another split second, a burning sensation came across every place that had a seal on it. It was agonizing, like every part of my body was being jabbed with a hot needle. Then the energy constricted around me, in such a way that I could practically feel the air in and around me being twisted and compressed. I grabbed my throat, trying desperately to breathe. Then, well, I exploded, and everything went black. I was stuck in darkness. Now, I'm not sure what I can really tell you about limbo. I'm not sure how to describe it besides it being constantly too hot and too cold at the same time. I'm sure that in normal circumstances, that would make me feel just right. Then again, I've never been through much normal stuff in my life. Now that I think about it, there is another thing I can tell you about my stay in limbo. A lot of people think that limbo is like some kind of empty space that fills the void between dimensions. They're pretty much right, but also wrong. Limbo is probably empty when people aren't there, but it's the whole opposite thing. Once you enter limbo, it's like you aren't in limbo, but you also fill limbo. All of the information I'd ever learned was there, constantly replaying over and over again. It's like my mind was bored, and had nothing better to do, and decided to torture me by replaying every moment I'd ever lived. There were even memories that I didn't realize that I knew. In fact, the first memories that were brought up were mostly sounds. At first they were muffled. Two particular voices could be heard a lot. I listened, feeling relaxed by their voices for a while before I made the connection. The voices I was hearing were my parents. As time went on, their voices became more distinct. My mom sounded like me, impulsive, headstrong, and occasionally shouting something that sounded like when I yelled, "Believe it." My father on the other hand usually sounded focused, soldier-like I guess. Yet, at times when he was with my mother and Pervy Sage when he was around he sounded kind and loving. He spoke of mine such a way that I knew he wanted and loved me. Then, I saw my parents' death. I watched a masked man take my mother, only to later see her crying face as my father left. Then, I watched with my small, barely seeing eyes as my parents fought and sealed the Kyuubi. I even got to hear the decree that the third Hokage made, the one where my father asked me to be seen as a hero, as well as keep the Kyuubi a secret from the kids my age. I can tell you that didn't work as well as he thought it would. I watched myself growing up, remembering things from books I didn't remember reading. I remembered my time in Konoha as a genin, the good and the bad. I relived my moments with Haku, the promise to protect my precious people and follow my own ninja path. I felt the battles with Kiba, Neji, and Gaara, reliving the pressure of proving myself to them, and everyone else. I watched myself lose Sasuke and swear to bring him back. And then I watched the final part of my life, the Kyuubi taking over and sticking us into limbo. I watched the memories over and over again, thinking that would be pretty much all I'd ever see while I was stuck there. I guess it never occurred to me that there could be other people stuck in limbo. For the longest time, there was nothing. It was just me and my thoughts, not even the Kyuubi to keep me company. Then, my mind seemed to bump into an object of some sorts in limbo. Curious, I reached out to it. As I touched the object in limbo, I jumped in shock as the object suddenly reached back. After a moment of confusion, I realized what had happened. There was someone else stuck in limbo, and whoever it was just as curious about me as I was of them. Now, I had been stuck in limbo for who knows how long. I was excited to know that someone else was out there. However, as time went on, my thoughts turned from excitement to confusion. The other person seemed alright, not really dangerous with any intent to harm me or anything like that. But there was just something off about their presence. There was just something familiar about them. Like a long-lost friend you couldn't remember the name of or something. The only problem was that we couldn't exactly talk to one another. Limbo doesn't really carry sound. In other words, we knew that the other person was there, but talking was pretty much out of the question. That was almost worse than having no one there. Luckily, I'm not the sort of person to give up. With a bit of time and a bit of experimenting, I found that we could send images. Well, it was more like I could send memories. And since I had remembered more of my life, I was more able to send them to the other mind easier than they could to me. During our conversations, I sent memories of the Leaf Village, my friends, trying to keep it as positive as possible. In return, I was shown strange images of places that couldn't have been possible, but were. There were strange words on some of the buildings I didn't understand. The other person tried to explain a little bit, but wasn't really able to bring up any good images to help explain, so I just let it go. I was shown the faces of some people, the other person's friends I suppose. They seemed happy, although I could tell the other person felt really sad as they remembered them. I was shown a camp, where some people known as halflings, the children of some people called Olympians, could go to train. I wasn't sure what an Olympian was, but it kinda reminded me of the Ninja Academy, and I told them so, showing them an image of the academy. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they might have been laughing at me. Why, I'm not sure. I never even got a chance to ask, because their presence suddenly disappeared with a cry. And once again, I was alone. Lost in my thoughts again. I knew that if I was stuck here alone again, that I would more than likely go crazy. I had been alone for too long and wanted out. Now, almost like an answer to my plea, I felt the tug at my mind. I'm not sure how I was pulled out, but it felt like my mind was physically yanked out of my memories. My mind, which had felt loose and free as it had wandered about, was violently reconnected with my body. And then I fell. It was disorienting, suddenly falling after being suspended in limbo for so long. The suddenly lurch made me feel suddenly sick, until after a moment of falling, I felt myself connect with the ground beneath me. The landing wasn't too bad, just a bit painful. I groaned softly, feeling sore all over. There was a pain shooting through my head, a revolting smell not helping in the least. While painful, wasn't as bad as some of the pains I remembered suffering through. Trust me when I say I remember only too well. After groaning a bit, I tried to open my eyes. Tried being the key word. Just the small amount of light that I could see blinded me, renewing the intense pain, though now more focused into my eyes. From what I could tell, it wasn't actually that bright out. Plus, if my nose wasn't lying to me, it was probably going to rain soon. Grimacing, I pushed myself up. I was quickly reminded that just before I had gone into limbo, I had gone through a rigorous training session with Pervy Sage. Pushing through the pain, I took a slow step forwards. Unable to see, I didn't notice the bottle until I stepped on it and was backpedaling fast. After a few steps though, my backside slammed into something, a metallic wall of some sorts. It only made my headache hurt even more, as a hollow ring resounded through the area. I silently questioned whether or not Kami hated me as I tried to take a couple deep breaths. Keeping my back against the metal wall, I tried to open my eyes again. The pain was excruciating, but I bore it as my sight slowly came back to me. I took a look around, unsure of whether or not I was hallucinating. It was some of the images I'd seen from Limbo. There were buildings covered in glass that reached into the sky, some probably taller than the Hokage monument. I watched the crowds of people walking the sides of the streets, while metal beasts rolled through the middle of the streets as though they were oblivious to the people. Groaning, I noticed that the metal wall I was leaning against was actually a box of some sort with a multitude of trash. I grimaced. Well, now, that explains the smell. With a small sigh, I pushed myself upright again. I was standing in some alleyway, isolated from the crowd and beasts. On either side, the crowds and beasts filled the street, which meant that it would probably be a bit more difficult to blend in if anyone decided to question me. In the alley, a few other people sat around, not really paying much attention to me. Except for this one guy who was probably a few years older than me who was looking at me with almost a hungry expression. Creepy. I glanced around again, trying to find something to give me some help. As I looked around, I noticed a piece of paper that was lying on the ground next to my surprisingly bare foot. I quickly picked it up, hoping to find something of value. Looking over the paper, I quickly became frustrated. The symbols on the paper were meaningless to me. I went over a few basic training methods that I knew of that pervy sage had taught me about code decrypting, but nothing worked. The code was simply too difficult to decipher. Then something strange happened. The letters began to move. Now, this had never happened to me before, so I was reasonably shocked as I dropped the paper and let out a small shout. Realizing that I had attracting some attention, I grinned nervously at them. One of the older men sitting in the alley grinned. From where I stood, I could tell he was missing some teeth, and that those teeth were in serious need of brushing. First-time user? What? I asked, shaking my head in confusion. My ears were still ringing from the box, so I wasn't sure if I'd heard the man correctly. The man just chuckled as though he knew something that I didn't. Drugs, man. Is this your first time? I tried to smile. What the heck is that? After a second, I just shrugged. Don't worry, it'll get easier to handle as you use it more. The man said, a throaty laugh escaping his lips. The younger man in the alley gave me such a curious look that I couldn't help but stare back. There was something strange about him, like his face was shimmering or under an illusionary jutsu. With a small amount of surprise, I took a step backwards. Hearing a small crumpling noise, I looked down. Noticing the paper under my foot again, I stared down at it. For a moment, nothing happened. The symbols remained as they were. Then, they began to move again. This time, I stood still, watching in amazement as the words began to reassemble themselves. Grinning in triumph, I picked up the paper again. The symbols had rearranged themselves into understandable kanji. Reading through some of the things on it, I quickly found that the kanji were written in a left-to-right fashion rather than the usual up-and-down fashion I was used to. Adapting to the new reading fashion, I skimmed through what was written. It didn't really have much that I could use, but there was something that I realized was helpful. In the top left corner was two words. Two words that were probably the most helpful and disturbing of all the words that could possibly be written on paper. Manhattan Times. I felt my gut clench. Manhattan. It was one of the cities that the other mind in Limbo had shown me. They had even shown me signs on some of the buildings in the area that had shared the city's name. I had already figured that I wasn't anywhere near any area that I knew of, but this was a whole new area. Hearing a small growl from behind me, I glanced back towards the noise. The young man was standing there, growling as his face seemed to shimmer in and almost violently. Realizing that the alley was not a safe place to stay, I turned towards the nearest crowd of people, and began to follow the crowd. Now, just in case anyone ever decided to follow my example, come out of Limbo, and then take a walk in Manhattan. Don't forget your shoes. I'm really not joking. Whether it was the explosion or just being stuck in Limbo, I had somehow lost my jacket and my shoes before arriving in Manhattan. My white shirt wasn't too bad, although my short time in the alley had soiled it a bit, while my pants were another matter altogether. Unlike my shirt, my pants were ripped in several parts near my knees and the bottom part was completely frayed and falling apart. To make matters worse, my pouch and kunai holster were missing as well. I groaned. This was definitely not the best I'd ever looked, and was far from the most comfortable way to travel. Not that I really had any choice in the matter. As I ran away from the young man in the alley and joined the crowd, I was immediately swept away by the crowd. It was hot, and I'm not saying it was fire country hot, but it was still hot nothing the less. And since I was barefoot, I had the lovely sensation of my feet being scalded as I walked down the road. And yet, there I was, casually strolling with the crowd in no direction in particular, ignoring the pain as much as I could. The only problem was that my feet didn't seem to share the same sentiment as the rest of my body. The hot, rock-like ground seemed to release the heat into my feet far too quickly for my liking. I was practically walking on hot coals, without any end in sight. Added to the fact that I was almost 100% sure that I was being followed, I was not a happy ninja. Growling in annoyance, I began to glance around. I don't really know what I was looking for, any place I could duck into to give me some time to think up a plan. After a moment of just looking around, I saw a place that had a big shoe on the front. Figuring that I could get some shoes while I was hiding, I quickly ducked inside. As I entered the store, I couldn't help but look around in amazement. The place had all sorts of things I had never seen or even thought of before. The ground was covered in some kind of pelt flooring, rather than normal wooden floors. The entire store was filled with shoes, which I'm guessing was the only product that they sold. And then there was the lighting. No candles or anything like that, no. They had some kind of lightning jutsu above our heads, illuminating the entire store. I couldn't feel any chakra being used by anyone around me, which made me wonder where the chakra was coming from. There was a desk to my left as I walked in. The woman behind the desk seemed nice enough, if not confused by my lack of footwear. I just tried to grin as innocently as possible as I asked where the sandals were. She pointed me in the direction of the footwear I was looking for, though she advised me to try out some of the other footwear in the building. Since I didn't really have much else to do, I told her that I'd look at them. There was a lot of footwear in the store. And not all of it was ninja sandals either. There were all kinds of footwear, sandals with toe covers, sandals without straps over the upper part of the foot or heel, and even boots. Grinning like a fool, I walked over to some of the different displayed shoes. There were a lot of them that were made of a material that I had never felt before, stuff that felt too soft to be useful in combat. I heard the young man from the alley enter before I saw him. He looked around the shop like he was looking for someone, probably me. I tried to pretend I was just a normal customer, looking for shoes like everyone else. There were a couple of other people who noticed the young man, but they seemed to ignore him, only looking at him for a moment. I glanced at him out of the corner of my eyes, noticing that as the shimmering faded out, only one eye remained. I blinked in confusion. Okay, I'll admit, I have seen some weird stuff as a ninja. There was a man who had 6 arms and another who could manipulate his bones into weapons, being some of the stranger people that I've met. So I wasn't really worried about that. What I was confused about was that no one else seemed to pay any attention to it, when for everyone else, it was clearly something that was not normal. Then I remembered the illusion the guy had put over his face, and put 2 and 2 together. Damn, not good, I whispered to myself as I moved away towards the back door. If this guy could create illusions, he was going to be a real problem for me, even with my knowledge of how to dispel illusions. I heard a low throaty growl, and made the mistake of looking up. Noticing the movement, the man shoved people out of his path as he forced his way towards me. Cursing under my breath, I ran through the back door. The back door, as it turned out, didn't lead back outside. Instead, it led to a larger room filled with lots of shelves, with even more boxes. Lots of boxes. I grimaced as one of the employees yelled that I wasn't supposed to be back there. I ignored him and moved swiftly through the aisles. I could hear him continue to yell at me as I heard the door I'd just entered slam violently against the wall. "What is wrong with you kids?" the employee yelled, turning his attention on the one-eyed man. "You are not supposed to come back." He didn't get a chance to finish what he was saying as One Eye shoved him into one of the metal shelves. I figured calling him One Eye would probably help me remember him better. "Halfling, why are you hiding, Halfling? Is he talking to me?" I thought as I hid behind another one of the shelves. "Hero." One Eye yelled, his thunderous voice still pretty far from my own position. "Come out. I just want to speak with you." "Sure you do," I muttered, not really able to shut my stupid mouth. There was a slamming noise behind me. I looked over my shoulder, trying to see what was going on, when I realized what One Eye was doing. He was shoving over the shelves in an attempt to flush me out. And to my horrific luck, it was working. "Come out, hero. Your parent has abandoned you to my hands," he shouted, shoving over another couple of shelves. I ducked down. What did he think he knew about my parents? I'd seen them both in my memories, and I distinctly remember watching their deaths, repeatedly. So why was One Eye talking about them like at least one was alive? Kronos knows your anguish. He can help you survive the coming clash of powers. Come out, and let me take you to him. We can work together, and conquer your foolish parents, who abandoned you. That was the last straw for me. My parents may have been dead, and I may have already known that they both loved and cared about me. But when anyone thinks they can just talk about my parents like they knew them, and like they had just abandoned me for no reason, I couldn't help myself. With a loud roar, I rushed out from behind the shelf. I could see One Eye's grin as he saw me come out change in less than a second as I rushed him. Now, One Eye was a big man, but I had lots strength training and surprise on my side. I slammed into him going as fast as I could considering the short distance, and knocked him over. Apparently he hadn't expected this, because he didn't fight back for a moment. Unfortunately for him, that gave me the opportune time to pull myself up and punch him across the face. I continued hitting him, muttering curses about him and insulting his intelligence. One Eye apparently didn't like that, as he swatted me off him, slamming me into a large pile of boxes. "Why do you fight me, hero? Do you not understand what Kronos is offering you? He offers you a chance to get back at your Olympian parent and prove your worth." One Eye said as he picked himself up. I shook my head. What did One Eye just say? Olympian? I remember hearing that word from somewhere, but my head was ringing for me to think clearly. Growling, I pushed myself back up, feeling surprisingly stronger than when I had gotten knocked down. I suppose the blood pumping through my veins was finally getting the adrenaline to my brain. "Don't insult me, or my family," I yelled, rushing him yet again. This time though, he was ready. Instead of taking the hit, he took a swing with his left arm, grazing me and sending me into another set of shelves. I growled, picking myself up once again. "You're strong, halfling, I'll give you that." "Okay." I was definitely certain I'd heard that word before. "That's why we need you. That's why we need your strength, your skills, to help us win this war." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, spitting out a small amount of blood that had gathered in my mouth. One Eye gave me a surprised, but also slightly pleased look. "You mean you don't know? You don't know that there are others out there like you? That there are others with your gifts? Others out there, who are being plagued by monsters like me, none the wiser to the truth. And then there are the ones who are blinded by their foolish brethren who tell them that they will be safe at a despicable place such as Camp Half-Blood." I blinked. This guy was a monster? If he was a monster, I was very curious as to what other people were called, monsters. "So you're a monster?" One Eye grinned. "Yeah, a cyclops, if you want to get into the names of things." I nodded. "Okay, I get that. But I'm not going with you," One Eye growled. "Why? Do you not understand what I'm telling you?" "No, I get it. You're telling people that their lives could be better, by telling them to join the people who hunted them down," I said as I felt my glare hardening as I stared him down. One Eye laughed. It was not a pleasant laugh. "Then you will die." One Eye rushed forward. Scowling, I leapt over him, watching as he fell over the shelves that he had previously knocked me into. As I landed, I shoved myself back towards him, leaping with my elbow leading. As One Eye tried to push himself up, I slammed into him, knocking him back into the shelves. Moving as fast as I could, I wrapped my arm around his neck, squeezing for all I was worth. One Eye apparently realized what I was doing, because he tried to stand up. However, I just squeezed harder, stopping him from being able to move so freely. He tried to swat me off of his back, but I just pressed myself closer to his back. I even felt him try and roll over. I shoved my foot against the ground to stabilize myself and stop him from moving at the same time. Finally, after a couple more seconds, he was finally out. I stood up slowly, uncertain of whether or not he would stay down. I've had plenty of bad experience with people not staying down the first time me or anyone else knocked them out. I knew that if I didn't make sure he was down, he would get back up, stronger than before. Luckily, it didn't look like One Eye was getting up anytime soon. I looked down at One Eye, thinking over some of the things he had said. He definitely called me a halfling, said something about me having an Olympian parent, and talked about a place called Camp Half-Blood. All things that I had already heard of, from Limbo. Growling in frustration, I took a deep breath. I scrunched up my face, trying to remember what I'd learned about Camp Half-Blood. After a couple of moments, a specific memory came to mind, one that gave me directions on where to find the camp. A grin crossed my face as I turned around. I almost lost it as I nearly tripped over a box that had slid right behind my feet. Glaring down, I just about kicked the box away when I noticed something. They were some kind of heavy-duty boots. Bending over, I pulled them out. Not bad, I thought. They looked like they could take some heavy use, and dish out some painful hits should I need them to. I pulled them on, my glare returning to a grin which widened as I wiggled my toes in the base of the shoe. Just my size. As I tied the string that was laced through, which helped tighten the boots on my feet, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, my luck was getting better. Maybe Cammy had decided to give me a break. As I walked out of the store and back into the rain, I swore I hear the faint sound of a girlish laughter. I soon found that following the directions I was given was far harder than I ever imagined. I had the directions, the landmarks, even the name of the area, Delphi Strawberry Service. That sold as a cover, you guessed it, strawberries. Unfortunately, that didn't give me any real clue as to where I was to go from Manhattan to get to the Camp Half-Blood. As I looked for any of the other landmarks I could possibly use, my stomach growled out in pain. Blushing despite myself, I realized that I had not had anything to eat since I'd gotten to Manhattan. Plus, since I'd fought One Eye, I was even more exhausted and hungry than I would usually be. Silently wishing for food, I looked around, desperate for anywhere I could get food, and fast. Whining quietly, my eyes scanned the surrounding area. I knew that there was food somewhere. The main problem was that I didn't know what sold what. There was the possibility of just checking them all out, but that would be time-consuming, and with the metal beasts still dominating the roads, I couldn't cross over to check out most of the shops on the other side. Then I noticed the line of people walking in front of the metal beasts. And the beasts were waiting for them to cross. Curious, I followed the way that the crowd moved towards the crossroad. There were different lights hanging over the crossroads, flashing different lights in some kind of pattern. I attempted to reach out with chakra to see who was controlling the lights. But like the shoe store, I couldn't feel anyone controlling the lights. Impossible, and yet I was watching them work all the same. It's really amazing. Traffic at this hour. I jumped as I whipped around to face the speaker. I was surrounded by so much noise that it was difficult to really know when one single person was attempting to follow you. This had been frustrating me for a bit before, but I had tried to ignore it because I was hungry. Not the best thing to do. But can you really blame me? I was hungry. Facing the speaker, I gave him a quick once-over. He was a middle-aged man with an athletic figure. He had black curly hair, with pointed sort of ears, and a sly grin. He was wearing a strange shirt with words on it that took a moment to sort themselves out. New York City Marathon? I asked, gently scratching my ear. The man grinned. Yep, I run at least one a year. Okay? I said, unsure of what to think of the man. He seemed nice enough, but then again I've known people as nice as him who turned out worse than they had seemed. You headed anywhere in particular? He asked. I opened my mouth to speak, when I was interrupted by my stomach deciding to speak for me with a loud growl. I looked away slightly while the man just gave me a curious raised eyebrow. I'm going to go with a wild guess that you're looking for somewhere to eat. No, I nodded, silently cursing my stomach. For a seasoned warrior, the sound of a growling stomach was the equivalent of telling everyone you weren't at your strongest. And in a strange and unfamiliar town like this, I was in need of keeping my guard and energy up. The man chuckled, reminding me that he was still there. Well, I do happen to know that there is a couple of fast food places right across the street. If you want, I can take you there. I almost refused, not really liking the fact that some random person was helping me, probably with some ulterior motive. However, as I opened my mouth to speak, a horrifying thought came to me. Gamma-chan, my frog-shaped wallet, was still lying in the hotel with Pervy Sage. Which meant that even if I could get to it right now, I was more than likely broke, without really spending anything either. Just my luck, Thanks. I said, glancing at the man again. He has a kind smile that helped relax me a little, if only a little. Great. Follow me, it's really not that far. He walked out into the middle of the road, me following on his heels. As we crossed the road, I was surprised as I noticed that as we had been talking, the beasts had come to a standstill, making it possible for us to cross. Halfway across, I couldn't help but take a closer look at them. Glancing at the nearest beast, I blinked in confusion. There were people sitting inside of the beasts. Shaking my head in confusion, I hurried after the man who'd already made it across the street. Falling into step with the man, I took another look around. There wasn't much difference in what was around us, although now this might have just been my imagination. The crowd seemed smaller and easier to move through. So, where are you from? The man asked. My mind shut down for a moment, unsure of what I was supposed to say without saying too much. Suddenly, words from Pervy Sage's training came to mind, perfect for this situation. When lying on the run, it's sometimes best to tell a partial truth, as you already have half of the information you need, and the other person is probably looking for. I'm looking for a friend. I lost him a while ago, and since we were headed in the same direction, I figured I'd meet with them there. I said, silently congratulating myself on my quick thinking. I scratched the back of my head nervously, wondering if he'd buy it. So you're a traveler? That's cool, we get a lot of people like that here. The man said, nodding as though he'd just understood something. He was about to say something else when his pocket suddenly began to shake. He gave me a sheepish look as he pulled out a small box. Will you excuse me a moment? I have to take this. I nodded. What the heck is that? I thought as I watched him fiddle with the box for a moment. He muttered something into the box, acting like he was actually having a conversation with it. After a moment, he sighed and put the box back into his pocket. I'm sorry, but I must go now. No, that's fine, go right ahead. I said, relieved to hear that he was leaving. He was just a little strange for my tastes. Well, before I go, I should probably give you this. As he spoke, he pulled out a backpack from behind himself. Funny, I don't remember him having that before. I thought as I hesitantly took the bag from him. It looked normal, I suppose. A single strap that went over my left shoulder. A single pouch full of some stuff, pretty basic. But the thing that made all my suspicions leave in seconds was when I noticed the bag's color. It was a nice bright orange. I decided to reassess my opinion of him. This guy was awesome. Grinning like a fool at the surprising gift, my training decided to remind me of reality. There are very few people who will offer you gifts for free. Why? The man shrugged. I don't need something like that. Got enough to carry as it is. Besides, I'm certain you'll have more need of it than I will. I looked over his face, trying to look for something, anything out of place with his words. He had a kind, yet knowing smile. I've only seen smiles like that from the old man before he died. Unable to sense anything out of place, and figuring I would need the bag, I shouldered the pack. I adjusted it to get it to feel right before speaking again. Thanks, no problem. There's some useful stuff in there, but if you ever run into a situation where you need to get out of trouble, just tell the bag to open in your language. And just to be safe, do be sure to tell it to close when you're done. Everything should stay with you that way. I blinked. What? Oh, and I almost forgot. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something that reminded me a little of Gama-chan, only in folded leather. Bad habits are hard to break. Sorry for taking this. I'll see you later, Naruto. I took the object from him, peeking inside. In the folded leather was a bunch of green paper, a piece of paper with the words, bus pass, on it, and a piece of plastic. Curious, I took out the piece of plastic, turning it over in my hands. After turning it for a bit, I noticed the difference in the two sides. One was blank while the other had some writing in it. Looking over the writing side, I felt my blood freeze over. It had a picture of myself with some words saying I was from Leaf Academy. I looked up, wanting to question the man. However, he was gone, probably melded into the crowd. I looked at the spot where he just stood, a shiver running up my spine. He called me Naruto, even though I hadn't told him my name. Trying to shake off the uneasy feeling the man had left with me, I walked into the nearest restaurant, a place called Burger King. Glancing around, I began counting. Despite no longer being with Pervy Sage, I figured that I would need to keep practicing what he'd taught me. It had definitely was a simple enough thing to practice. No chakra necessary. There were at least 5 employees that I could see, Info I didn't see the point in knowing. There were 6 men, 2 with families, a young teen sitting in a corner with a pair of strange-looking crutches nearby wearing a weird hat, and 3 others in similar brown jackets standing around somewhat suspiciously. 3 kids, 2 different-aged girls and 1 boy, were trying to run from their parents' grasp. From what I could tell, both girls were with one couple while the boy was with the other. There was one single woman, a young woman who was talking to one of the employees, probably placing an order. It seemed safe enough, I suppose. However, I felt something in my gut telling me to stay on guard. Something wasn't right here. I walked forward nervously, noticing a board behind one of the employees' head, the menu I suppose. I looked at what they had, feeling frustrated by the selection. I've never heard of a cheeseburger before, but it didn't sound like the best thing to eat right now. And besides that, I was on a mission to find my glorious ramen. The one thing they didn't have on the menu. I just about cried. How could any food place not have ramen? It was the greatest food ever created. To not have it was blasphemy in my opinion. I almost walked out then and there, certain that there was ramen out there. However, both my stomach and a new foe fought me. I glanced at one of the jacketed men. "Excuse me, but where's the bathroom?" The man gave me a dirty look, pointing down the side next to where the employees were still taking the woman's order. I nodded, quickly thanking him as I rushed towards the bathroom. There was no way I was this unlucky to be hurting this much. Sighing in relief, I walked towards the sink to wash my hands. As I dipped my hands into the water, I noticed my reflection in the mirror and paused. I still looked like my normal self, I suppose. Naturally spiky blonde hair, 3 whisker marks on either cheeks, and a lean build. However, as I looked myself over, I couldn't help but think I looked different. My hair was a little longer, less spiky I suppose, but it was also more affected by gravity. Several strands hung in front of my face, no headband to keep it out of my eyes. I sighed, feeling a sudden weight on my shoulders. I looked older. Drying off my hands, I adjusted my bag as I grabbed the handle of the door. Looking at the bag, a curious thought occurred to me. What's in the bag? Walking back over to the mirror, I swung the bag off my shoulder and onto the counter. With a few deft movements, I zipped the pack open. Looking inside, I couldn't help the small chuckle that escaped me. Inside the bag were several sets of clothes. Nothing fancy I suppose, but definitely better than what I was wearing. And as I looked through the different shirts, I just about cried. There were so many orange shirts. I love cami right now. Sifting through the clothes, I pulled out an orange button-down shirt and a pair of dark brown khakis. Grinning from ear to ear, I walked into the nearest stall. After a few moments, I stepped out in my new clothes. Feeling better than ever. Putting the folded leather into my pocket, I put my old shirt and pants into the bag. In doing so, my hand brushed up against something else in the bag. Somewhat frustrated by how confused all of this was making me, I pulled out the offending object. It was a jar, similar to the jar of healing ointment that Hinata had given me during the Chunin exams. Looking it over, I noticed a label. Squinting my eyes to try and better see the words, I slowly read, H. Hermes Athletic Muscle Relief. What the heck? Opening the jar, I scooped a small amount of the ointment out. Giving it a small sniff, I smiled as the foreign aroma hit my nose. It actually smelled pretty good. Touching it to my forearm, I immediately felt the relief. I'd been trying so hard to ignore the pain. The relief soothed and relaxed me. Whoever this Hermes guy was, he sure knew his stuff. I rubbed as much as I could on everywhere that hurt, almost all of it all over my body. There was a small spray-on bottle with it that read, applied to clothing for all-day relief. With a shrug, I sprayed a layer of it onto my clothes. Smiling at the relief, I shouldered the bag. My stomach growled, reminding me what I'd come here to get. Chuckling to myself, I headed out the door. Today was looking good. I spoke too soon. As I walked out of the restroom, I could see that the atmosphere had changed. Most of the people I could see were huddled into a corner, a frightened look on their faces. The employees were more than likely hiding under the counter. The 3 men in the leather jackets were standing around, strange objects in their hands. By the way the people were staring at them in fear made me a bit curious, but I had bigger issues. My life has been to protect people, and I wasn't just going to stand around and let these men terrify these innocent people. Of course, with my awesome ninja training, I would be able to take them out without them ever noticing. Plus, I had the element of, "Oi, where'd you come from?" Surprise. That's the guy who went to the bathroom. He's not wearing the same clothes, but it's definitely him. He's got those weird marks on his face like I told ya. The man who directed me to the bathroom said as he turned his weapon on me. Weird? My birthmarks are completely normal. I thought, feeling pretty sure that if I voiced the thought it wouldn't go over well. Instead, I said, "What's going on?" The first guy, the one who first noticed me, growled. "Just shut up and go sit with the others." I almost laughed. If this guy was trying to intimidate me, he wasn't doing a very good job. The weapons in their right hands was the only thing that was truly intimidating about them. There was plenty of killing intent, but it was so wildly unfocused that I wasn't fazed. If I hadn't faced people like Zabuza and Gaara, I might have been slightly intimidated. But since I had, it felt pathetic. I walked forward, putting myself in the middle of the three men. I still hadn't figured out what my plan was, especially since I didn't have a weapon, and was outnumbered. That is to say, I was trying to think of a plan that didn't involve me revealing my abilities. With my shadow clone jutsu, I could match their numbers and even exceed them. But since I still didn't know enough about how things worked here, I wasn't willing to reveal myself as a ninja. "Did you not hear me?" I said. "Get in the corner." The man yelled again, putting the barrel against the back of my head. I let my eyes move to the other two thugs. There was one on my left and one on my right, just spaced enough to notice that one was covering the entrance while the other was guarding the hostages. Both of them had their attention on me, their weapons pointed down and away from me. I frowned. They must have had a lot of skill if they were willing to point their weapons away from me. Or they had no idea what they were dealing with. "Get in the corner." As I felt him push the weapon more against my head, I decided to change the situation. Spinning around, I used the outside of my left arm to knock the man's arm away and upward, effectively disarming him. Not waiting a second, my right arm followed my left, the outside of my palm making contact with the man's throat. He went down coughing and sputtering. The second man, the one covering the entrance, was next. He tried to bring his weapon level with me, but only got halfway as my foot connected with his face, knocking him onto his back in a way that looked rather painful. His weapon flew out of his hand, the longer barrel portion sliding into my hand. Continuing my turn, I brought the handle of the second man's weapon down between the third man's eyes. He apparently wasn't keeping up with everyone else, because he had a second to look at the weapon cross-eyed before it collided with his skull. With that, all three men were incapacitated. All this happened in 5 seconds. Dropping their weapon, I looked at their crumpled forms. I'd hit pretty much all of them in the face, and had knocked 2 of them out. The first man that I'd hit was no threat yet, as he was still trying to catch his breath. He seemed to be looking for something, his weapon I guess. I didn't see it either, and glanced around for it. "Don't move," a voice yelled. I glanced towards the voice, wondering if I'd missed on of the assailants. However, it turned out to be all right, as it was the other teen who had picked up the first man's weapon and was pointing it at the man. I noticed his shaking hands and realized that he wasn't a warrior. But he was still acting to protect everyone. I could definitely respect that. My stomach let out another rumble, turning a few heads. I scratched the back of my head nervously. I know this is a bad time, but could I possibly have some food? As it turns out, beating up people does in fact has a few rewards. I ordered a dozen of those cheeseburgers, since it would be the best I could get under the circumstances. As I realizing that the green paper in the folded leather was money, I began to rummage through my pockets to get my money out to pay. Before I could get it out though, the boys' fathers stepped forward and paid for it. When I asked why, they told me that I helped to keep their family safe. I sat down at one of the closest tables and took out one of the cheeseburgers. I quickly unwrapped and shoved the thing into my mouth. I'm not sure if it was from hunger or just trying to get the first bit over with. I was immediately grateful though, as the taste hit my tongue. It wasn't ramen, but it wasn't half bad either. Within a moment I had gone through close to half the burgers. As I was about to dig into my 6th, I felt a small tug on my shirt. I glanced down, seeing the little girls looking up at me with big smiles on their faces. "Thank you, Mr. Hero," they said as they handed me a piece of paper. Confused, but happy to see that they were happy, I smiled. Opening the paper, I saw their attempt at drawing me standing on the 3 bad guys with an arrow explaining who was who. At the top were a few words that were obviously thanks. I couldn't tell because the words stayed as they were. Is that me? I asked, acting confused. Nah, can't be. I don't look that cool. No way, you were even cooler. The young boy suddenly popped up and said. He had a grin from ear to ear, and eyes as wide as. Well, the cheeseburgers. I scratched the back of my head nervously. Thanks. I was just doing what anyone else would though. Yeah, but you were all. Pow, bang, slam. The boy said, trying to mimic what I'd done. The girls giggled, the younger of them trying to follow along. The boy looked back at me. I mean, they were going to shoot you. Weren't you scared? Shoot me? Is that what those weapons do? I thought, shaking my head. I didn't have time to be scared. People could have been hurt if I didn't do something. The boy's eyes widened and his mouth dropped. I thought I might have said something wrong. So cool. Or made myself into a role model all over again. John. Come on, we've got to go. The boy's mother called as she and his father got their stuff together. Ah, but Mom, no buts, now let's go. The boy turned to me. Bye Mr. Hero. Bye John. I said, watching the boy run off. I felt a small pain in my heart as I watched them. Living in my memories gave me enough images to picture what I would have looked like if it were me running to my parents. It hurt, even though I was glad to see them. A shadow suddenly loomed over me. I glanced up to see the teen standing over me. He looked a bit uneasy as he spoke. Hi. Hi. He motioned towards the seat across from me. Do you mind if I sit here? Sure. He sat down, fiddling with his fingers nervously. Hi. You already said that. I chuckled. Oh, right. The teen said. He scratched his cheek, nervousness practically oozing off of him. So, where are you headed? Maybe I don't know much on being socially acceptable, but I'm pretty sure people start with introductions. Shrugging, I just decided to answer his question. I'm headed to Delphi's strawberry service. Heard there were good strawberries there. By the way, the name's Naruto, Billy. He said, looking a bit better. Then, he suddenly stiffened, looking excited. Did you say Delphi's strawberry service? Okay, weird reaction. I thought. Yeah, why? And no reason, he said, almost falling off his seat. I just so happened to have gotten some work there this summer. Cool. You wouldn't happen to know how to get there from here, would you? I asked, feeling excited myself. His energy was surprisingly infectious as I found myself grabbing the rest of my burgers and heading towards the entrance, Billy right besides me. It's pretty easy. In fact, if you have some money, we can be there in a half hour. Billy said, using his crutches to propel him forward in a strange way. I had thought one or both of his legs were broken, but he seemed fine to me. Okay. I stopped at the edge of the side road, watching Billy wave down a yellow metal beast. There was no way all this was happening. I need shoes. Monster shows up and I get shoes. My clothes need replacement. A guy gives me a bag with clothes. I need food. I get treated to lunch after beating up some thugs. And now I was getting a ride to the place I was trying to go to, and had a guide to show me where to go. I heard a small, girlish laugh behind me. I glanced behind myself, seeing nothing there. And yet, I knew someone was watching me. There was laughter again, as Billy waved me over to begin our trek to Camp Half-Blood. Thanks for watching guys.